Wow, that's fantastic. You know, it was getting warm in here, and I was going to have everybody like stand up and shake a little bit to kind of wake up, but I think that kind of did it. So we're going to call it good right now. So hi, I'm Bill, and listening to having conversations with a bunch of you both yesterday and today, and listening to the previous talks, I can say with 100% certainty that I am very much like every single person sitting in the chair in the audience today. You're all people that really love the community that you're a part of, and you want to make it something better and bigger than it already is. Community that I come from is in Michigan, the high five states, right? You get the high five thing, right? Okay. More specifically, I spend most of my time in Grand Rapids, which is about 40 miles from the lakeshore. All of my friends and colleagues there are people very, very much like you. They want to transform the community into the kinds of place that they want to live. And so what I like to do is actually just kind of share a handful of projects that we've been working on in Grand Rapids that have that's drawn kind of deep community participation. It's driven a fair amount of press to some of these things as well. These projects really are things that, either have been transformative or currently kind of in the process of being transformative in Grand Rapids. The title of my talk today is supposed to be See, Make, and Play, because I believe it's kind of this really, really deceptively simple three-step process that's made these things very successful. So see an opportunity, make a transformative experience, and then ask everybody that you can think of to play along with you. I mean, it's basically as simple as that. And so let me talk about a couple of these things. Or not? There we go. The first one that I want to talk about is this thing called Art Prize. In 2009 is when this project started. Essentially, in its own words, Art Prize is the world's largest art competition. Yes, Grand Rapids, Michigan has the world's largest art competition with $560,000 worth of prize money. Now, that might be interesting in and of itself, but I think probably the more radically interesting feature of this is that all of that money is given away and determined by a public vote. We actually get the community involved in that process to give it away. And even if that might be fairly radical in and of itself, I think there are other qualities and factors about Art Prize that make it even more radical. It's the fact that there is no curation whatsoever in this event. Venues self-identify. Artists self-identify. And venues can be anything. Venues can be everything from abandoned spaces to the tops of bridges and walkways and the very river that runs through to the city itself. Actually, there's an interesting piece. The table and chairs on top of this river is actually an Iowa artist from Des Moines. And it was a fantastic project to actually see that thing all come together. But basically what happens is that any artist in any venue can sign up to participate, and then the website, artprize.org, essentially acts like Match.com, right? A venue will say, I need an artist that kind of looks like this, maybe has some sculptural pieces. The artist will go, I've got some sculptural pieces, and I like long walks on the beach, and maybe they should get together, right? And the Art Prize organization doesn't pair them. This all happens organically. People are welcome to participate in essentially what ends up being what I think one of the world's largest scavenger hunts. Art Prize takes place over 3 square miles every fall in Grand Rapids. They don't just get involved as spectators, but they get involved as voters. They actually actively go through on smartphone devices, right? And every single piece that they see, they vote on. They say, do I like it, do I not like it? And it's those winners that get the big purse of money. Personally, I think Art Prize is one of the world's largest excuses to get creative. My team at Art Prize introduced and launched this event over the course of a 6-month period. There wasn't a ton of planning. It was an experiment, and quite frankly, we had no idea what we were doing at all. But we did know one thing. We knew that we were going to have a good time, and we told everybody that. And so if they participated, at the very least, even if it failed miserably, you were going to have a good time. The first event took place in September 2009. We had anticipated maybe something like 15,000 to 20,000 people would show up. To our surprise, 200,000 people showed up in Grand Rapids for a 2.5-week-long event. Mazel tov. They showed up to essentially tour through 159 self-identified venues hosting 1,262 artists from all over the country and all over the globe, for that matter. It was, to say the very least, overwhelming. Completely overwhelming. Hotels in downtown Grand Rapids ran out of rooms. The first beautiful the first beautiful Sunday of that event, the restaurants actually all ran out of food. Specifically, and this is some images of a large park where there's a large installation piece that's happening. This piece of pointillism is actually all done with push pins, right? Pretty fun. And then there were actually, existing gallery spaces that were used as well. This is an international piece, the Red Ball Project, and basically that red ball shows up in a different place every single day, and you got to find it, which is pretty fantastic. To other gallery spaces and uses. This is a piece from this year. This year is the 4th year of Art Prize. This is a piece called Lights in the Night Sky. 15,000 of these lanterns went up into the night sky. And there's a bit of controversy in the city because the artist told the mayor that there were only going to be about 2,500. And so there were more, but it was kind of really great. Right? There's another kind of really good picture of that, right? This is the winner from 2009. This is Rand Ortner's piece. Rand is a Brooklyn-based artist. This is called Open Water, number 24. Completely changed his life, winning $250,000 for first place. And this actually ends up being the piece that won this past year, actually last weekend. It's called Elephants. It's from an artist right now based in Burbank, California, by the name of Adana Kerr. And Adana actually grew up in Iowa, so there is some kind of good Midwest juju going on here with these types of things. Art Prize this week, that ended this last week, had much larger numbers than our first year. Whoops. The event this year saw about 400,000 people come into the city of Grand Rapids over this 2.5-week period. They walked through 162 venues and they looked at 1,517 pieces of art. It's a lot of art, and it's nearly impossible to see every single one of those pieces, although people definitely do try, which is interesting. A lot of the stuff that you hear if you read about Art Prize, about these enormous crowds, this building, the gray thing kind of more in the foreground, is the Grand Rapids Art Museum. This is a line. This is the backside of the museum, and this is a line wrapping all the way around the art museum to get inside. How many other Midwestern cities have lines wrapped around the museum to get inside? Actually, that line was moving slow because they were already at capacity in that space and they couldn't let people in. It's a gold LEED certified building, and they actually have carbon dioxide detectors throughout the space, right? Because they measure that kind of stuff when you're LEED certified, right? And the alarm goes off on a regular basis because they have so many people in it. The art museum this year, I think, saw something like 150,000 people through their space in that 2.5-week period, which is really exciting. During the first year's event, this was one of the social experiment pieces of art where 100,000 paper airplanes were thrown off the top of buildings. Looks like a lot of people showed up. That's actually a lot of people. I love that gasp. Actually, this is even a better view. That's what happens when 30,000 of your friends and neighbors get together to enjoy art on a sunshiny Sunday afternoon. Great stuff. Tied to this project is another one called SiteLab. Essentially what SiteLab does is it creates temporary, site-specific projects aimed at facilitating this kind of collaborative environment between arts, education, building, businesses, and other kind of cultural communities in Grand Rapids. This is the space that they used for Art Prize this past year. It was the old public museum that had been vacant, essentially, a decrepit building that had been vacant for about 18 years. This is what so front, beautiful facade. This is what it looked like on the inside of the space. SiteLab has been a venue for Art Prize for the past 2 years and doing some really amazing work. And actually, I should step back just a sec. The original purpose of SiteLab for the founders, Paul Lamenta and Tom Clinton, who were arts professionals. They saw this huge gap between college art programs, kind of how they were preparing students. They're doing a really great job in preparing them for the craft of the art, but very little, if any, attention has been paid in thinking about installation and how to get people to actually come to a facility to view art. The folks at Site Lab have been doing an amazing job taking a space like this and transforming it into this. So this is the Public Art Museum, and in many of the pieces, they would take all of these existing dioramas that existed. This was the reptile room, and so you find a lot of the pieces that are still there that are reflected in the space, as well as this car, which most definitely wasn't there before. This won the Jurard Prize for Best Venue this past year that was awarded by Tom Eccles. Tom Eccles is the executive director for the curatorial studies program at Bard College. He also was the director for the public arts program in New York City, and so he's somebody who knows a lot about kind of art and public spaces. Jerry Salt, who is an art critic for New York Magazine, actually referred to this space, and I have to read the quote: "Site Lab is the best space for artist-curated exhibitions I've seen in the United States for some time," which is really fantastic. This piece is part of that exhibition. This is Alois Kronschlager. He worked in this whole wing of the museum, basically kind of juxtapositioning these 27 dioramas that existed with this whole notion of kind of intervention between contemporary architecture. I like this one in particular because it has this plank that kind of walks you through this barrier, right, of the space. Like, who would think of like walking into an art museum diorama like this? I was actually really nervous about it, but my 6-year-old had no problem walking into the space. I was like, no, don't go. And then she was there, and we got to snap a little picture of her. Past exhibition spaces have used buildings that have not been in use for years, and they completely transformed the place with really interesting new art, all the way to the Blandford Nature Center, in which they took, a nature center and they turned it into like a really interesting venue for a night show of art, as well as this program called Active Site, where they've reinterpreted a lot of spaces. So, you hear about these things and you think, there's something going on in Grand Rapids. That's great. Well, interestingly enough, though, in January of last year, Newsweek put Grand Rapids on a list of top 10 dying cities. Like, you can be a top 10 of a dying city. But we were number 10. And, as typically happens when something like this goes down, right, when somebody disses the community that you're a part of, right, the mayor gets all riled up and writes a really formal yet really passionate plea to the editors of Newsweek, basically saying, Grand Rapids is a great place to be. Look at all of the vibrancy in the community and all the really amazing things that happened. It drove a ton of conversation online and everywhere. People were all riled up about this. But, to a large extent, those were only words. Enter Rob Bliss. Rob is an artist in town and a filmmaker who has built up a reputation of doing really kind of large-scale, crowd-pleasing projects. This is an image of one where we basically took Rosa Parks Circle, which is a mile-in, architected community space, gave people free sidewalk chalk, and they covered every single nook and cranny of Rosa Parks Circle. Hundreds of people showed up, thousands of sticks of chalk were used, and basically the city was transformed into a big art canvas. Rob has also created things like a really, really huge water slide. And why? Just because he thought it would be fun. And it was. People lined up for 3.5 hours just to go down the thing once, and it was well worth it. It was a great time. He's done things like organized big pillow fights, and although the pictures would be too gruesome to show, he's also organized the world's largest zombie walk. But so thinking about this problem, Rob actually looked at things a little bit differently. He said, how do we engage the public? And worked off of this project called the Grand Rapids Lip Dub. For those of you who don't know, a lip dub is basically a video taken, lip-synced, one continuous shot. And typically when these things happen, you pick a a video, right, or a song that's kind of short and easy to manage, like 3.5 minutes. Well, instead, Rob decided he was going to do American Pie, which is 9+ minutes. But it got people excited. The Grand Rapids Lip Dub actually had 5,000 volunteers participate and get excited about the community, right? Everything from the fire department to, those are cheerleaders and gymnasts jumping around. I got involved in it. There was a wedding. But the interesting thing is 5,000 people got together on essentially a really great Saturday afternoon to tell the rest of the world, how excited they were to live in this community. A band, and this has to be all timed, so those were kayakers that had to be timed coming into the river at the exact same time, which is really crazy. The mayor got involved. Shit got blown up, which was really great. There was a helicopter, right? And you could kind of pull away and see everything that was going on in the city. And then Convention and Visitors Bureau got involved in this nice little Experience Grand Rapids sign. What I think is really interesting about that, though, is that there was a barrier that was lowered, and Rob essentially asked people to participate, and because people were excited about it, they jumped right on in. This got a lot of international press and attention, and I'm a big film fan, so I like what Roger Ebert has to say about movies. He actually called this the world's greatest music video ever, which might be hyperbole, but it was like really cool, right? I mean, who does this kind of stuff? Yes, we have our own TEDx Grand Rapids, too. I'm hosting that for the 2013 session, which we're planning. I appreciate all the work that everybody here has done to pull this event off, which is really fantastic. Our event, like I said, is in the third year. We curate basically an audience of about 750 of the best and brightest in West Michigan to come and spend a day listening to 12 speakers. Here's another view of that space. This is LZ Granderson, who came to speak this last year, who's an ESPN reporter. His talk, which was about the super secret gay agenda, actually has seen on CNN, because we got some coverage there, seen well over 3 million views, which is really exciting. But this is a community-driven event, and is like most TEDx's, it has less to do with the people on stage and more to do with all of you all in the audience. In a sense, the TEDx organizers are really just there to kind of, prompt, challenge, tempt, and cajole all of you into doing something really interesting for the community that you're a part of. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on too. There's Laugh Fest, there's Design for Good, there's Stark Garden, there's Hub Grand Rapids, and all of these things. And so you're probably saying to yourself, well, that all sounds impressive. So what? Well, let me tell you the so what. In 1961, Jane Jacobs, in her classic treatise, The Death and Life of Great American Cities, wrote this: cities have the capacity of providing something for everybody only because and only when they're created by everybody. It's an important thing to pay attention to. You see, all of these projects were essentially started by people who have seen the city in a way and as a place that they want to live. And they make these programs and events and exhibitions to approach that particular vision. And then they very, very intentionally ask everybody to play. All of these events have been successful in no small part to the city of Grand Rapids really embracing this sense of playfulness. The notion is that play is okay. And maybe even more so, that play is necessary, and maybe it's even critical. Play is a design principle which invites participation by everyone. Play creates a safe haven for creating new things without the fear of failure, because seriously, how do you fail at play? Right? I mean, seriously, how do you fail at play? When play isn't working right, you adapt and you modify and you change, and then you start to play all over again, right? And you experiment and you learn things. Ultimately, play is about growth. Play is about engaging people, and it's that open, engaged mind that really creates kind of the instance for learning, and not just individual learning, but community-based learning. Play is about creating a whole simple set of rules. It's not chaotic, right? There is some structure to it, and it's guided. Play gets all messed up, though, when you start to talk about things like risk management. We saw the earlier talk, and there's that whole form for the city, right? That's when things get in the way, when people's eyes glaze over and they just don't want to participate because it just seems too hard. Risk mitigation and management takes the fun out of everything, and ultimately it ends up creating barriers. All too often, in the pursuit of creative efficiencies or enabling processes or even architecture, we forget about play and these barriers get creative. And so when you start to consider play in these terms, there's something really meaningful that's afoot. It's a reformation of sorts. Whether you think about it in terms of the democratization of content or the arts or the power of crowdsourcing or even open-sourced education, there's something deeply human at play when we play. Ultimately, this is about enabling and empowering the human voice. Actually, human voices. Individual humans who are the most playful and creative and resilient and impassioned amongst you. They may not have the most experience, and they may not be the obvious voices, but these are the people that can make your cities the vibrant places that you want to live. And so my challenge to you is, go ahead and play with them. Thanks for listening.